Am I the a-hole for cutting off my parents after they lost my inheritance, then blocking them when my dad had a heart attack and they needed money? Your father is in the hospital and you're going to let him die over money? That's what my mother said to me, standing on my porch in a coat that used to be nice, 3 years after the last time we'd spoken. Not hello. Not I'm sorry. Just an accusation shaped like a question, the same way she used to ask if I'd clean my room when she already knew the answer. I want to be clear about something before I go further, because I know how this sounds. My dad wasn't dying. He'd had a mild cardiac event. That's the actual term the hospital used. My sister told me later, not heart attack. And he was stable within 6 hours. But my mother didn't lead with he's stable. She led with the thing designed to make me feel like the villain in my own driveway. I stood in the doorway in sweatpants, holding a laundry basket like an idiot, and I said, I'm not letting anyone die. I'm just not paying your mortgage. She looked at me like I'd slapped her, like I was the one who'd done something unforgivable. And for about 4 seconds, standing there, I almost caved. Some old, stupid, 12-year-old part of my brain still wanted her to be proud of me instead of needing something from me. Then I remembered the spreadsheet. I remembered sitting at their kitchen table almost exactly 3 years earlier, watching my father slide a folder across the table like he was doing me a favor, and telling me that my inheritance, the money my grandfather had specifically earmarked for me, had been reallocated to cover a family emergency, and that I should be grateful they hadn't told me sooner and let me worry. So I said, you know where to find a loan officer, Mom, and I closed the door. That's the short version. Reddit, I need you to tell me if I'm the asshole, because everyone in my family has an opinion, and at this point I don't trust a single one of them, including possibly myself. My name's not actually important, but for the sake of this not reading like a legal deposition, call me Ryan. I'm 25 now. This story starts when I was 22, 3 months out of a community college HVAC certification program, still living in my parents' basement in a mid-sized town outside Columbus, Ohio, wondering if I'd made a huge mistake not going to a 4-year school like my sister did. My parents are Tom and Karen. My dad spent 18 years as a regional manager for an auto parts distributor before he got laid off in 2019 and decided, with zero restaurant experience, mind you, that what our family really needed was a barbecue joint. My mom worked the front desk at a dental office and still does, 3 days a week, mostly because she likes complaining about Dr. Feldstein's chewing habits more than she needs the money. Or at least she used to not need the money. My sister Ashley is 2 years older than me, married young to a guy named Doyle. Everyone calls him by his last name. Don't ask me why. It just happened, and she'd gone the acceptable route. Nursing degree, steady job, house in the suburbs, the whole picture our parents could show off at church. I was always the late bloomer. That's the phrase my mom used at every single family gathering for about 6 years. Ryan's a late bloomer. Like I was a houseplant. Here's the part that actually matters. My grandfather, my mom's dad, a guy named Walter Kessler who fixed small engines out of his garage for 40 years and somehow turned that into 3 rental properties and a paid-off house, died when I was 20. He didn't have some enormous fortune, but by the standards of our family, it was real money. Somewhere in the ballpark of $310,000 once the property sold, plus the house itself. Grandpa Walter was specific about one thing while he was alive, and he said it more than once, at more than one Thanksgiving, usually after his second beer. The grandkids get something set aside. Not touched. Not borrowed. Set aside. He didn't trust banks with big words, but he trusted the idea of a promise made out loud in front of witnesses. He wrote it into his will as an actual clause. My sister and I were each named for a fixed amount, $40,000 apiece, to be held by my mother as trustee for the benefit of us, specifically listed for education or starting a trade or business. I want to be honest about something because it matters later. I didn't understand any of that at the time. I was 20, my grandfather had just died, and I was mostly just sad. I didn't read the will. I didn't ask questions. I trusted that whatever was supposed to happen would happen, because that's what you do when you're 20 and your parents have never given you a specific reason not to trust them. For 2 years, nobody mentioned the money. I finished my HVAC certificate. I started working for a small contracting outfit doing junk removal and odd jobs on the side because the HVAC apprenticeship hours were inconsistent and I needed cash. My best friend from high school, a guy named Deshaun who'd started a pressure washing business the year before, kept telling me I should go independent instead of working for someone else. I kept saying I didn't have the capital. I want to pause here for something that has nothing to do with the main story, but it's relevant to how my brain works, so bear with me. Around this time, my coworker Deja, she did our scheduling and books, went through almost the exact same thing with her own family, except it was her mother who'd borrowed a settlement Deja got after a car accident and never paid it back, and Deja just let it go. Never brought it up again, still drives her mom to appointments every single week like nothing happened. I used to think that was insane. Now I think about it differently. I'll get back to that. Anyway, 2 years after my grandfather died, I finally asked about the inheritance, mostly because Deshaun asked me why I hadn't asked yet, and I didn't have a good answer. I brought it up casually at dinner. Hey, whatever happened with the money from Grandpa's estate? And my dad got a look on his face that I now recognize as the look of a man who's been dreading a question for 2 years. That was the night of the folder. That was the night everything changed. My dad had the folder ready, which in hindsight tells you he'd been expecting the question, maybe rehearsing the answer, for a while. We were at the kitchen table, the same table I'd done homework at as a kid, the one with the water stain shaped like Florida near the edge, and my mom was doing that thing she does where she busies herself at the sink so she doesn't have to make eye contact during a hard conversation. So, my dad said, sliding the folder toward me, before you say anything, I want you to understand the position we were in. I hadn't said anything yet. That should have been my first clue. I opened the folder. Bank statements, printed emails, a copy of a promissory note that I'd never signed, between my mother, as trustee, and my father's restaurant LLC. $40,000, wired out of the trust account in 3 installments over about 8 months, starting roughly a year after my grandfather's death. You used my money to open the restaurant, I said. Not a question. We used family money, my mom said, still facing the sink, to try to save this family, Ryan, because your father lost his job and we had a mortgage and 2 kids, and I wasn't about to watch us lose the house. Ashley's part of the family too. Did you take her $40,000? Here's the thing. They both went quiet in a way that answered the question before either of them said a word. No, my dad finally said. Just yours. Ashley's is intact. I remember the specific, physical feeling of that sentence landing. Not just that they'd taken money that was legally, explicitly, in writing, set aside for me, but that they'd made a choice about whose money to take, and the choice was me, and I didn't know why, and some ugly part of my brain immediately assumed it was because Ashley was the favorite, and I was the late bloomer. The one who wasn't going anywhere anyway, so what did it matter? Why mine, I said. My dad rubbed his face. Ashley's was in a separate account your grandfather set up through his lawyer directly. Yours was just held under your mother's name at the credit union, easier to access. It wasn't personal, Ryan, it was logistics. It's my life savings, and you're telling me it was a logistics decision. It's not your life savings, it's money you never had. My mom snapped, finally turning around. You can't lose something you never held in your hand. I want you to sit with that sentence for a second. Because I have sat with it for 3 years. You can't lose something you never held in your hand. That's the sentence I go back to more than any other one in this whole story. The restaurant's been open for a year, I said. Is it even making money? Silence. Is it making money, Dad? Building a customer base takes time. These things take. Is it making money? No, he said. Not yet. I sat there for a long time. Long enough that my mom went back to the sink, and my dad started reorganizing the folder like the papers being neat would fix anything. I want it back, I finally said. We don't have it to give back right now, my dad said. We're going to pay you back. We had every intention. When the business turns around. So never. Don't be dramatic. That's my mom's favorite phrase for me, by the way. Don't be dramatic. She's used it on every emotion I've ever had that inconvenienced her, going back to when I was 7 and cried because our dog died. I stood up from the table so fast my chair fell backward, and I remember my mom flinching like I'd thrown something, even though I hadn't moved toward either of them. I'm moving out, I said. With what money? My mom said, and I genuinely believe she thought that was going to shut the conversation down, that it was some kind of trump card. Instead, it just made something in my chest go very, very still and cold. I'll figure it out, I said. I always do. Guess it's a good thing I'm used to not having help. I moved into Deshawn's spare room 2 weeks later. I didn't speak to my parents again. Not really. Not for 3 years. A couple of forced hellos at Ashley's 4th of July barbecue the following summer. Nothing more than that. I stopped answering calls. I didn't attend Thanksgiving. My mom sent a birthday card that year with $60 in it and a note that said, "No hard feelings. We love you." And I sent the $60 back in an envelope with nothing written inside it at all, which I'll admit, looking back, was needlessly cruel, and probably the moment my mother decided I was the villain of this story instead of a person who'd been wronged. Here's where I have to explain the business, because the money is the whole reason this blew up the way it did. Deshawn and I started our own operation about 8 months after I moved out, residential and light commercial HVAC install and repair, with junk removal as a side offering because I already had the truck and the contacts. I'm not going to pretend it was some overnight miracle. The first year, we were both still working other jobs on the side, sleeping 4 hours a night, arguing about whether to lease a second van. But Deja came on to handle our books and scheduling about a year in, and between her organizational instincts and Deshawn's talent for landing property management contracts, we went from 2 guys in a truck to 14 employees and 3 vans in under 3 years. Last year, the company did just under $1.4 million in revenue. My personal take-home isn't anywhere close to that. Obviously, overhead eats most of it, but I bought a house 18 months ago. A real one. 3 bedrooms, decent neighborhood, 40 minutes from my parents. I didn't tell them any of this. Not on purpose, exactly. I just didn't call, so there was nothing to tell. Ashley knew, because Ashley and I stayed in a weird, strained, low-contact relationship the whole time, mostly texting about her kids. She knew I'd started a business. I don't think she knew the numbers. Which is, I think, why everything detonated the way it did when my dad had his cardiac event. It happened on a Tuesday. Ashley called me. First actual phone call from her in months, and told me Dad had collapsed at the restaurant. Yes, the restaurant was still open, still not profitable, still somehow limping along 3 years later, which is its own small miracle or its own small tragedy, depending on how you look at it, and been rushed to the hospital. I asked if he was okay. She said they thought so, they were running tests, but that mom was a wreck, and could I come? I said I'd think about it. That was the wrong answer, and I knew it was the wrong answer the second I said it. But something in me still wasn't ready to walk back into that hospital waiting room and perform concern for people who'd spent my inheritance and called it logistics. I didn't go that night. I went 2 days later, after Ashley texted me a photo of Dad sitting up in a hospital bed, looking small and gray and old in a way I'd never seen him look, and something in me cracked enough to drive over. That's when my mom ambushed me on my own porch. Actually, I should clarify, the opening scene wasn't at the hospital. It was 3 days after, when she showed up at my house unannounced, having apparently gotten my address from Ashley without asking me first, which is its own betrayal I haven't fully processed. She told me the restaurant's bank had called their business loan. The mortgage on the house was 2 months behind, and Dad's medical bills, even with insurance, were going to run somewhere around $11,000 out of pocket. She said, and I remember this verbatim because it made my ears ring. We just need $30,000 to get current on everything and stabilize. And Ashley says you can afford it now. Ashley says you can afford it now. I called Ashley about 4 minutes after my mom left. That conversation did not go well. Why would you tell them my numbers? I said. Those aren't yours to share. I didn't give them numbers, Ryan. I just said you were doing well, because you are, and I'm not going to lie to our dying father to protect your privacy. He's not dying. He had a cardiac event. You told me yourself he's stable. Do you hear yourself right now? Do you hear how you sound? I hear myself fine. I sound like someone who got robbed and isn't interested in funding round 2. It's not robbery. They're your parents. It's literally robbery. Ashley, there's a promissory note with my name on it that I never signed. Go read it. That's when things escalated past just the two of us. Ashley, apparently upset enough from that call, posted something on her private Facebook. I only know this because our cousin Mike, who is not on speaking terms with subtlety, screenshotted it and sent it to the extended family group chat, the one with 11 aunts, uncles, and cousins in it, the one I'd muted 2 years earlier and hadn't looked at since. Ashley's post didn't name me directly, but it didn't have to. Something along the lines of, "It's amazing what people will do to their own family when money's involved." Some of us remember where we came from. 17 likes. For comments, all supportive of her, none of them aware of a single fact of the actual situation. Mike sent it to the group chat with the caption, "Does anyone know what this is about?" And within an hour I had. My Aunt Debbie, my dad's sister, a woman who has never once in my life asked me a single question about my own life, but has strong opinions about everyone else's, messaging me directly. I don't know the full story, but family is family. Ryan, your father raised you. My cousin Priya, who I actually like, texting privately. Hey, ignore the group chat insanity. But for what it's worth, are you okay? This sounds like a lot. And, worst of all, my Uncle Frank, my mom's brother, Grandpa Walter's other kid, the executor of the estate, a man I hadn't spoken to in almost 3 years either, calling me directly, which he had never once done in my entire adult life. "I think you and I need to have a conversation your parents haven't had with you," is how he opened it, and I felt my stomach drop, because I could tell from his voice this wasn't going to be him taking their side. Uncle Frank is not a warm man. He's an accountant, semi-retired, the kind of person who corrects your grammar at Thanksgiving and means well, but has the emotional range of a tax form. But he was also the executor of Grandpa Walter's estate, which meant he'd seen every document, every disbursement, every number, in a way none of the rest of us had. "I tried to warn you," he said. 3 years ago. Do you remember? Honestly, I didn't at first. Then it came back to me, vaguely, embarrassingly. A stiff phone call not long after the folder confrontation, Uncle Frank saying something like, "If there's ever an issue with how the trust was handled, you have options, legal options." And me, 22 and furious and not in the mood for accountant speak, brushing him off because I associated him with the same generation of adults who'd let this happen in the first place. "I remember you calling," I said. "I didn't really register what you were saying." "That's fair. You were young, and it was a bad time. He paused. I need to tell you some things your parents haven't, and I need you to actually hear it this time, because it's relevant to what's happening now. Here's what Uncle Frank told me. Over the course of about 40 minutes, in the flattest voice imaginable, like he was reading me a mildly interesting quarterly report. First, Ashley's $40,000 wasn't as untouched as I'd been told. It had been held in a separate account. Yes, through Grandpa's lawyer. But about 18 months after my confrontation with our parents, my mom had gone to Ashley directly and asked to borrow against it too, framing it as the restaurant just needs a bridge, and Ashley, who I guess inherited more of our mother's conflict avoidance than I ever gave her credit for, had quietly agreed to let them use about half of it, $20,000, and never told me. Not because she was hiding it maliciously, Uncle Frank said, but because she was ashamed, and because she didn't want to be lumped in with what happened to me, and because some twisted part of her wanted to believe her situation was different, more voluntary, more her choice, even though functionally it wasn't that different at all. Second, and this was the part that actually reframed everything for me, the restaurant wasn't the only hole the money had gone into. My dad had a gambling problem. Sports betting, mostly, some online poker. It had started small, according to Frank, sometime after the layoff, as a way to make some extra cash while between jobs. And it had gotten quietly, catastrophically out of hand over the following few years, hidden inside the restaurant's already chaotic books, indistinguishable from legitimate business losses to anyone who wasn't looking closely. Frank had noticed irregularities when he helped with some of the estate paperwork the year before and had confronted my mother privately. My mother knew. My mother had known for over a year and hadn't told anyone, including, I'd bet, herself, in any way she was willing to sit with. I'm not telling you this to make you feel bad for them, Frank said. I'm telling you because you deserve to actually know what happened to your money instead of the version they've been telling you and everyone else, which is a story about a struggling small business, when the real story is more complicated and, frankly, worse. I sat with that for a long time after we hung up. It didn't make me want to write a check. If anything, it made the idea of giving them $30,000 more feel like throwing a life preserver into a house fire. But it did something else, something harder to explain. It took my mother, specifically, off the pedestal of well-intentioned but overwhelmed that I think I'd secretly still had her on. And it also, weirdly, made me feel something for my sister I hadn't expected, not less angry at the situation, but less alone in it. She'd been quietly bled too. She just handled it by staying silent and resentful instead of leaving loudly, the way I had. I called her back that night. Not to apologize, exactly, I wasn't there yet, but to ask if it was true. She didn't say anything for a long moment, and then she said, very quietly, "How do you know about that?" Uncle Frank told me. About the $20,000. And about Dad. She started crying on the phone, which Ashley basically never does, and said, "I didn't want you to think I was as stupid as you probably think I am." "I don't think you're stupid," I said, and I meant it, even though 4 days earlier I'd genuinely believed she was the enemy in this story. "I just wanted it to be different for me," she said. "I wanted to be the one who could help without it turning into what happened to you." Ashley set up a dinner. I want to be honest that I almost didn't go. I told her I'd think about it 3 separate times before I actually said yes. And even then I told her I wasn't committing to anything. I wasn't bringing a checkbook, I was coming to talk, and that was it. It was at Ashley's house, not my parents', which I think was deliberate on her part. Neutral ground, plus a built-in excuse to end things early if she needed to, since she could always cite the kids' bedtime. Doyle made himself scarce in the garage the second things started getting tense, which honestly might be the smartest move anyone made that whole night. My mom looked older than I remembered. That threw me more than I expected it to. My dad looked better than I'd feared, color back in his face, but he moved slower getting into his chair than a 54-year-old man should. "Thank you for coming," my mom said, which was such a strange, formal thing to say to your own son that it set the tone for how stilted the whole night was going to be. "I'm not here to fight," I said. "I'm here because Ashley asked, and because I know some things now I didn't know a few days ago." My dad's face changed. He knew immediately what I meant. My mom didn't, or pretended not to. "What things?" she said. "About the gambling, Mom." The silence that followed was the loudest silence I've ever sat through in my life. My dad put his fork down very carefully, like the table might be rigged to explode if he moved too fast. That's not," my dad started, and my mom cut him off with, "Who told you that?" in a voice that had gone completely flat, all the performed warmth of 10 seconds earlier just gone. "Does it matter who told me? Is it true? It's not as simple as, is it true?" My dad exhaled, long and slow, and said, "Yes." My mom actually put her head in her hands at the table, and for a second I thought she was going to cry, but instead she looked up, and she was furious, not sad, furious, and pointed it directly at me. "So what? You get to sit there and judge us? You, who's had it easy this whole time, who got to just walk away and build your perfect little life while we were drowning." "I didn't walk away from an easy situation. I walked away because you took $40,000 that wasn't yours and lied to me about why." "We didn't lie. We told you it was for the restaurant. You told me it was a family emergency, and I believe there was an emergency, but you're telling me now that at least some of that money went to sports betting. So which is it? Was it desperate or was it reckless? Because those aren't the same thing, and you don't get to blend them together every time it's convenient." "I was trying to fix things," my dad shouted, louder than I'd heard him shout in years, and everyone went quiet, including him, like he'd surprised himself. He put his hand over his mouth for a second, and when he spoke again, it was smaller. "I lost my job. I was 51 years old, and nobody wanted to hire a 51-year-old regional manager whose whole industry was consolidating. I panicked. I thought if I could just get ahead, just once, get us some breathing room, I could fix it before anyone had to know, and it got away from me. And by the time it had gotten away from me, the restaurant wasn't even the real problem anymore. It was just the cover story, and I hated myself every single day for it, and I still do." "Then why?" I said, and my voice cracked in a way I hadn't planned on. "Why was it my money? If you knew what you were doing, if any part of you knew, why did you let it be mine and not hers?" I gestured at Ashley, who had gone very still, holding her wine glass like a life raft. "And not your own retirement account. Why mine?" My mom answered that one, not my dad, and it's the only part of the entire night that actually made me feel like she understood, even a little, what she'd done. "Because," she said, "you were the one we thought would forgive us. Ashley holds grudges. You've always been the one who just came back. Every time. We thought you'd come back." I didn't have anything to say to that for a full minute. Because it was true. That's the part that got me. Every fight, every slight, every year of being called the late bloomer, I always came back, forgave, let it go, right up until the moment I didn't. And they'd counted on that pattern the same way you count on a bridge holding weight, without ever checking if the bridge was rated for it. "I'm not paying for the mortgage," I finally said. "I'm not paying for the restaurant, and I'm not paying off gambling debt, even accidentally, even laundered through a bill I feel bad about. I won't do it." "So you're just going to let us lose the house," my mom said. "I didn't take your house. You did that. I'm not the mechanism of your consequences. I'm just refusing to be the guy who absorbs them." Ashley, quiet the whole time, finally spoke. "I think," she said carefully, "that Ryan giving money directly to you two right now would be the worst possible thing for everyone, including you two. And I say that as someone who's furious at both of you separately from whatever's happening with him. My mom looked betrayed all over again, this time by her daughter, and honestly, that might have been the most honest moment of the entire dinner. It's been about 5 weeks since that dinner. Here's where things actually stand, with no bow on it, because there isn't one. I did not give my parents $30,000 or any amount of money directly. What I did do, and I go back and forth on whether this was generous or just another form of control, I genuinely can't tell anymore, is talk to a family law attorney about the promissory note situation, mostly out of curiosity about what my actual options were. Turns out there's a real argument that my mother, as trustee, breached her fiduciary duty, and I could pursue it. I haven't decided if I will. Filing something like that against your own mother is a door that doesn't really close again once you open it, and some days I want to open it out of pure principle, and other days I think principle is an expensive hobby I don't actually need. My dad is apparently in outpatient treatment for the gambling now. Ashley confirmed this. My mom hasn't told me herself. I don't know if it's real or if it's the kind of thing people do performatively when they've been caught. And I recognize that's a cynical thing to think about your own father recovering from a heart scare, but I've been lied to by these two enough times in the last 3 years that cynicism feels less like a character flaw and more like basic self-preservation at this point. I did set up something for Ashley's kids, a small education fund, not enormous, but real, held by a lawyer, nothing my parents can touch. I did it partly because I love my niece and nephew and partly, I'll admit, because it let me do something that felt like repair without funneling a single dollar anywhere near my father's gambling or my mother's house payment. Ashley cried when I told her. She also said, quietly, "You know this doesn't fix what happened to my $20,000. And she's right, it doesn't, and I told her that. I told her I can't fix that. Only they can, and I don't think they're going to. My parents are, as of this week, still behind on the mortgage. Ashley says there's a real chance they'll have to sell the house and downsize into an apartment. My mom hasn't called me. My dad sent one text, 2 weeks ago, that just said, 'Hope you're doing well.' No follow-up, nothing about money, which honestly threw me more than if he'd asked for something, because I don't know what to do with a version of my father who isn't asking me for anything. The extended family group chat has mostly moved on to arguing about Thanksgiving hosting duties, which I find almost funny in how quickly people's outrage evaporates once there's a new, easier thing to be annoyed about. Aunt Debbie still thinks I'm the villain. Uncle Frank, of all people, sent me a one-line text that said, "You handled that about as well as anyone could have," which from him is basically a Hallmark card. Deshawn thinks I did the right thing and should stop thinking about it. Deja, who watched her own mother do something eerily similar and never confronted it at all, told me she's a little envious that I got to say the things out loud that she never did, even though her situation stayed peaceful on the surface. I don't know which of us actually has it better. I think about that a lot, more than I think is normal. So, Reddit, AITA for cutting my parents off, for not bailing them out now that they need it, for letting my dad's health scare not change my mind about the money, or AITA for the years of silence beforehand, the return birthday card, the fact that some of this, the gambling specifically, I genuinely didn't know about until 5 weeks ago, and maybe I owe someone more grace than I've been giving, even if I can't say exactly who. I don't know. Genuinely. I've read this whole thing back twice, and I still don't know.